Renting versus buying a home, the real math. Imagine you have $90,000 sitting in your bank account, and you're finally ready to move into a home of your own. You have two choices. You could use that money to buy a house and become a homeowner. Or you could keep renting, invest your money, and let your investments grow over time. And if you ask 10 different people which option is better, you might get 10 completely different answers. But today, we're going to forget the opinions and actually look at the numbers. Because buying isn't simply about making a mortgage payment, and renting isn't simply about throwing money away. Let's start with one of the most common beliefs people have about renting a home. You've probably heard someone say it before. Renting is just throwing your money away. But is that really true? Or is there more to the story? When you rent, you're paying for a place to live, just like a homeowner is. But you're also paying for something homeowners don't always have: flexibility. And in many cases, you're avoiding major responsibilities like property taxes, expensive repairs, and ongoing maintenance. Now, let's meet Alex, because we're going to use his situation to do the math. Alex is 30 years old, earns $80,000 a year, and wants to make a smart financial decision. After years of saving, Alex has managed to build up $90,000 in available savings. Then he finds a house he really likes, and the asking price is $400,000. With a 20% down payment, Alex would put $80,000 directly into the house. That would leave Alex with a mortgage of $320,000. And this is where the calculation starts to become much more interesting. Let's assume, purely for illustration, that Alex gets a fixed mortgage rate of 7%. At that rate, the principal and interest payment would be roughly $2,129 a month. But here's the problem. That $2,129 isn't the full cost of owning the house. First, Alex has to account for property taxes, which can add a significant amount to his annual housing expenses. Then there's homeowner's insurance, another recurring cost that comes with owning the property. And don't forget maintenance, because houses require repairs whether you're financially prepared for them or not. A roof eventually needs replacing, appliances break, plumbing fails, and unexpected repairs can become very expensive. Depending on the property, Alex could also have homeowners association fees, commonly known as HOA fees. Suddenly, that mortgage payment doesn't look anything like the complete cost of owning the house. And there's another financial cost that many first-time buyers completely overlook. It's called opportunity cost. The $80,000 Alex puts into the house can't simultaneously be invested somewhere else. Now let's look at Alex's other option, continuing to rent. Suppose Alex finds a comparable apartment for about $2,000 a month. At $2,000 a month, Alex would spend $24,000 a year on rent. And yes, unlike mortgage payments, rent doesn't give Alex ownership of the property. But here's the important part. Alex gets to keep $90,000 instead of putting it into the house. And if he invests that money, it has the potential to grow over time through compound returns. He could also invest some of the difference between his rent and the total cost of owning a home. Now we're finally making a fair comparison, buying a home versus renting while investing the difference. This is where many rent versus buy conversations become misleading. People often compare their monthly rent directly against a homeowner's monthly mortgage payment. But that's not really an apples-to-apples comparison, because a mortgage isn't the entire cost of owning. The better comparison is total ownership cost versus the financial outcome of renting and investing. So imagine Alex decides to keep his $90,000 invested instead of using it as a down payment. Over time, compound growth can potentially turn that relatively small starting amount into something much larger. But remember, homeownership has its own form of wealth building. As Alex pays down his mortgage, he gradually builds equity in the property. Now let's fast forward 10 years and see what happens to both financial strategies. The renter has been paying rent while investing the money that wasn't used for a down payment. Meanwhile, the homeowner has been making mortgage payments and gradually building equity in the house. So after 10 years, let's put their financial positions side by side. The homeowner owns a valuable asset, and that asset may have increased in value over time. But the homeowner also paid mortgage interest, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and potentially transaction costs. The renter doesn't own the house, and that's an important disadvantage to acknowledge. But the renter may have built a substantial investment portfolio during those same 10 years. So after everything is considered, which one actually comes out ahead? The answer depends heavily on something called the break-even point. The break-even point is where buying becomes financially competitive with renting and investing. And if you buy a house and sell it only a few years later, transaction costs can make buying surprisingly expensive. But if you stay in the house for many years, those upfront costs can be spread across a much longer period. That's why one of the most important questions isn't whether you should buy, but how long you plan to stay. Buying can make sense when you expect to stay in the home for many years. It can also make sense when your income is stable and your monthly budget can comfortably handle the costs. And before buying, you should ideally have an emergency fund separate from the money you're putting into the house. Most importantly, the total cost of the home should fit comfortably within your overall financial plan. Buying can also give you stability and more control over your living space, which has value beyond the mathematics. But renting can absolutely be the smarter financial decision in certain situations. For example, renting may make more sense if you expect to move within just a few years. It can also be safer if buying a house would drain almost all of your savings. Renting may also make sense when comparable homes are extremely expensive relative to the cost of renting, especially if you're disciplined enough to consistently invest the money you're not putting into the house. But there's one major mistake that both renters and homeowners can make. Buying a house does not automatically make you wealthy, especially if the house leaves you with no money to save or invest. And renting doesn't automatically mean you're financially irresponsible, especially if you're building wealth through investments. What matters most is what you do with the rest of your money after paying for your housing. So, should you rent or buy? The honest answer is, it depends on your situation. Don't begin with the question, which one is better? Instead, ask yourself, which option makes more sense for my income, my goals, and my numbers? Start by looking carefully at the price of the home you're considering. Then look at the mortgage rate, because even a small difference can dramatically change the long-term cost. Next, calculate property taxes, insurance, maintenance, HOA fees, and the costs of eventually buying or selling. Then compare those costs with your rent and the potential growth of the money you could invest instead. And most importantly, think honestly about how long you expect to stay in that home. Because the best financial decision isn't necessarily the decision everyone around you is making. It's the decision that makes sense for your income, your goals, your lifestyle, and your actual numbers. So don't follow financial advice blindly. Before you rent, buy, or invest, do the math. If you want more simple explanations of complicated money decisions, subscribe and follow along. And in the next video, we'll calculate whether you should pay off your mortgage or invest your extra money.